Welcome back to Egypt Old Kingdom. Last time out, we built the temple to Aha. There are still 7 more to go in the First Dynasty. So, lots more to be done. I want to grab an advance here that I've procrastinated some on getting. The medicine, now, the worker creation cost, lowering that by 10% helps, but military retirement will be even more significant. We are losing almost 25 now per turn to retirement. So, even getting a couple of those back is going to make a significant difference in how fast the army grows at this stage. And this is also, I think, a more interesting thematic topic than perhaps, this pharaoh or king did this or that. A medicine born through the development of mummification allows Egyptians to study the inner structure of the human body. Various ranks of royal doctors existed and specializations. Complex medical texts composed, and Egyptian medicine would earn great fame across all the ancient world. And that is very much correct. I think that Egyptian medicine at this time was the most advanced in the world. And one of those texts they refer to is known as the Ebers Papyrus. There are several that we know of, but this one comes from around 1600 BC. They believe it was copied from a much earlier text around the time that we're in now. It's fascinating to me some of the things that the Egyptians knew and didn't know about medicine, what some of their theories were. And of course, it's very much tied up into their religion. The professions of priest and doctor are quite related, especially early on. It's not at all uncommon that a priest and a doctor would be called in to help with various aspects. A good example of both the sophistication and the inaccuracy of what Egyptians believed medically is in the circulatory system. They correctly surmised that the heart was the center of that, but they didn't view it as being only blood. They believed circulation of liquids throughout the body was key to health, and they included in that tears and urine and every other bodily fluid that you can imagine. They had some treatments relating to worms and aspects of believing that you needed to keep the body clean that medical practitioners today wouldn't object to. On the other hand, they believed the heart was also responsible for reasoning, and the brain was simply discarded during mummification. And they had all manner of other prescriptions, such as crocodile dung, being used to ward off evil spirits or even as a method for birth control. But again, given the time frame that we're talking about, what I find to be the amazing thing is that they knew as much as they did, not that they were missing the pieces that they were missing. There is one additional adjustment I do want to make, and that is to clear out the marshes here, so that this region, the area of the two scepters, will be more productive in the long term. Well, there's a nice boost. Increasing our luxuries with that expedition. And I'd like to knock out the marshes here as well, but I don't think we can afford to do that. We're going to need as much as we can get from the luxury resources. Until this isn't as tight, I'm just going to let this expedition run another cycle. Maybe come back to that later. So, Bronze Age settlements in the Aegean. Knossos, Phaistos, Pylos, Akrotiri, and Troy, found on the islands and coasts of the Med. Akrotiri will become one of the most important trade centers of Minoan civilization, of course one of the precursors to the eventual classical age in Greece. And Troy needs no introduction. And we have another tomb. Now, there's more to the tomb of Dejere here than meets out. Maybe not the tomb itself, but the time of Dejere. And that's not because of Dejere himself. There's another historical figure here that's quite important. Nithotep, who, as far as I know, is the first significant ruler in Egypt that is a woman that we have clear evidence of. And of course, Nithotep not listed in the various lists of kings, because that would never have been done for a female regardless of their power. But there's a tomb to Nithotep which is originally thought to be the tomb for Menes, until it was looked into a little bit more closely. It's basically comparable in terms of its size to other rulers of the era. And so Nithotep was most likely, best guess that I have seen on this, Aha's wife, and then Dejere was too young when Aha died, so Neithotep was sort of a caretaker, although that term minimizes it too much. I wish I had a better term to describe it. Taking care of the throne as a regent, however you want to describe that. And then Dejere comes to power, and this tracks with the fact that he had a very long reign. We think it was probably a little over 40 years, so that would mean he was pharaoh from, whenever he came of age to basically the end of his life, the balance of his adult life being spent that way. And there's just a lot that we don't know, and very little that we do know really here. Was there any legitimacy questions? Was the land particularly unified in Egypt by that time? Or there was still a lot of chaos? Was there controversy? How did all that transition work? Because we don't know of any time having this sort of thing happen prior to this. I would like to know more about it, but it's just sort of a black box. But I think other than, maybe the time when Menes comes to power, of the entire First Dynasty, it's just, I find this to be the most fascinating period, partly because of the unknown. Now, we did get this scouted. I want to move our worker across the river, continue that process, just moving down the banks of the Nile. And we've also got another advance here that I want to hit. This is a cheap one that I keep bypassing again, but I'm going to grab it now. We'll knock out slavery. Prisoners of war were typically slaughtered due to insufficient food supply in pre-dynastic Egypt, and we've talked about this concept before. Even in prehistoric nomadic times, with not just dealing with enemies, but also dealing with the high rates of infanticide that we believe were practiced. The idea, of course, is that if you try to feed everybody, those even that aren't in the prime of life, everybody's going to starve. There's just not enough food. As food production increased, prisoners were kept for the king's work, being called the living dead. Such slaves soon became Egyptians and performed corvée labor, just like the rest of the laboring classes. And I think it's useful to just sort of try to turn the modern part of your mind off when we think about these things, because we have the concept of slavery, which we immediately have a big negative, reprehensible association with, and absolutely rightfully so. But at this particular time in human development, it's actually a progressive step. Because as terrible as being a slave is, it's better than being killed, because you can't be fed. Now, gameplay. We have +1 production every turn. We're far enough along that's not really going to help us much. Capturing slaves after the battle can give you additional workers, but I'm pretty much staying close to my maximum workers, so this is really not going to affect much in that regard. And I'm also going to boost Osiris once here. And this is a sort of a delicate balance. I want to keep boosting Osiris's bonus so that we have it when we need it, increasing that bonus effect on the other cults, but I also want to wait as much as I reasonably can in doing that, because more tombs we get, the higher return on investment we're going to get there. Another nice bonus from an expedition over here. We definitely need to boost our luxuries here. Colonize the barren land. And I was originally planning on working on these wells and really exploiting this area, but I don't think there's going to be enough here to justify that, at least not yet. This is not, the best expedition. It's a minimum size one. So I'm going to yank them, grab another worker. Our swamp is done here, so at least we're getting more productivity there. Let's throw out another scout. And then I also want to focus in here and start working more on this oryx. And we're ready to peacefully assimilate the toad people. Excellent. So this will reduce our luxuries expense some, but not that much, because we're going to need to spend more here. And this is just a case of starts out in low percent and increases slowly. So this could take a few turns, we could get it right away, or it could take quite a while indeed. keep hammering that masterpieces button to keep our luxuries intact, but our overall resources definitely headed the wrong direction. Now we do have another area here now that we can do the long-range expeditions for scouting. So let's travel to Upper Nubia, which would be further down the Nile here. This, of course, being Lower Nubia. And we did knock out Crete, so they're going to head off to the Balkans now. But we will have an additional bit of advancing that we can do as a result of that. So for this one, I want to go up to something a little bit more expensive. Going to grab our next culture boost with papyrus paper. Primitive paper made from the Cyperus papyrus reed. Inner pith cut into narrow strips, basically put in a perpendicular pattern, hammered, treated, etc. Hardly ever rots, and in a dry climate can last for millennia. While that durability definitely would have been a bonus to it at the time, it's arguably even a larger bonus for us today. Because much of what we know from this region and this time is due to various writings, such as those on the Ebers Papyrus and many, many others. And if it had been written on something closer to what we have today for modern paper, well, obviously it would have completely disintegrated long before we ever had a chance to read it. Whole bunch of stuff happening here. Okay, the Tomb of Dejere is up next. And I don't know of anything really substantial that we know about Dejere that's worth mentioning. Reign was probably about 10 years, so much shorter than that of Dejere. And we can now assimilate the lion people, but we don't have really enough luxuries, I don't think, to go after that yet. It would be very tight. And the thing about it is, once you start assimilating, you can't stop it in the middle and then go back at the same point. You would have to just start over. So I'm just going to do some trade here. That'll still bring us some nice production. And I think, yeah, we explored this area. Now this is a nice luxuries zone, so I am going to colonize it. Also will boost our worker total. Myth of Horus and Seth, we did really cover this at the beginning of the game, so if you want to read what this synopsis is, go ahead and pause the video. Another scouting area here. Once again, good for luxuries. This one is actually even better, so we're going to colonize that as well. And I think probably one more hit to Osiris is appropriate. Yay! The Toad people have joined in a reasonably quick amount of time. Excellent. You can see the boost here. Very nice. And also some more expeditions coming in, which will help us maintain. So I think with all that happening, we can definitely go and start assimilating the lion people. Let's also boost our worker count to the max again. And of course, now we're getting, 9 here for the production, and then also almost 3 for the army, and we will get our exploration as well. So that's our third exploration zone that has come into play. We'll switch to assimilating. And we are doing a good amount here, but these are both colonizing efforts. I'm actually going to slide over here and do another colonizing effort, not because of any resources that are here, but I just want to continue boosting my worker cap. Seth deciding to once again throw his weight around. And I think that we're now ready for a somewhat interesting choice. Could just boost luxuries with glass, or with royal statuary here. But this is much better, I think. The tax revenue, we've seen how powerful that is. I also am very interested in lowering down the worship cost again, of course. But I think what I'm going to do is just bank my favor for now, get the tax revenue boost, and then hit this one next. Then we'll be able to spam some cults out at that point. I think that's probably the best way to use all the resources. So the gnome system. And this is sort of just another development in improving the governmental hierarchy. Divided into administrative units called gnomes. In every gnome there's an economic, cultural, and religious center with nomarchs controlling these territories. So basically the idea of regional capitals, provinces, governors, if you will, maintaining them and having that local control. But the power of nomarchs was limited. Positions in the capital considered more prestigious than anywhere else, as one might expect. So, another nice boost to all of our resources coming in, which should really help. Don't have to use the masterpieces as much now. We seem to be stabilizing, even if not completely, somewhat, with our luxuries. And our fourth tomb gets us halfway through the First Dynasty. The Flax people bear immense respect for the horse. They've sent various gifts as a sign of their friendship. Excellent. So they are, well, we'll get to them in a minute, because we have the Tomb of Mernith, which is also quite important. Queen Mernith was a wife and mother of kings. According to ancient traditions, she could not be a rightful heiress of Egypt, yet her power while at the infant king's side was considerable. Utmost respect toward her was commemorated by tombs, on par with royal ones in majesty and splendor. So all of this has a lot that's similar to Neithotep. And also they both have, the Neith part of the name. Reference, of course, to the goddess Neith. But I think probably the main reason why the game, just focuses on Mernith here and doesn't mention Neithotep earlier is not so much for omission, but we're more confident, have a little bit more evidence that surrounds Mernith. So it's more solid ground there. And clearly, very similar figures showcasing the fact that, despite it being, of course, a very patriarchal society, Egypt did have a role at times for powerful women as leaders. And let's get back to our issue with Flax here. So, relations are 86% with them now, so they're quite good. We don't have the amount here to reciprocate, although we could. But I'm actually going to choose this one because it'll boost us right up to that 100% plus. I think that actually the 15 luxuries would cost us more. And now we can peacefully assimilate the Flax people if we want. We're not ready for that yet, but it's nice to have that option very much available to us. Fly people want to attack us. This is not good. They're attacking up here. And where are the fly people exactly? Is that these? Okay. Yeah, they dislike us for sure. But we should easily be able to fight them off there. Antelope herds, we've got tons of food. So this will not be a problem at all. We'll simply domesticate. And build another field. We've colonized this area. So I do think we're going to take the next step of clearing out the area there and getting this wells dug. We can also boost workers one more. It uses up some of our food. We've still got a lot left over. I think we're also now in a position where we can knock out these marshes. And then we will be looking much better on our surpluses when that's done. I think we've got enough scouting going on out here now. So I think I want to, let's see, over here perhaps with the hippos. Let's work on them. So I want to keep bringing in these animals, getting more favor, working on more farmland, all of those positive things. More exploration, more colonization. So let's make sure, first of all, that we get down here. Now, this gives us a nice boost to our luxuries again. We could get even more from a very nice expedition, but this is our 4th of the Four Corners exploration travel options. We're definitely going to take that. So we'll travel to the land of Punt, which should be further down this part of Africa. And let's clear out these wells at all. This is actually a better area, I think, as I mentioned, than that region. So keep those luxuries flowing, or the potential for luxuries, actually, in this case. And yet another worker. Do I want another scout? You know, I think this has not been completed. But our next objective is going to be soon to get into this area of Nubia. So, since we're not ready to sort of befriend these groups, I think what I do want to do is, these are relatively not liking us. So the military option is probably the better one. Let's go ahead and work on conquering them. And you can see we don't have a huge advantage here. We may want to expend, a cult worship of Nath or something to make that happen. But let's wait till we get a little closer and see what it looks like. There's another field. Another bonus from the expedition. We're doing pretty well at getting fortune on those. I mean, you can see with the increase in taxes, the income we're getting from these is pretty crazy now. You're colonized, so you can move along. We also have another worker available. So I think we just keep right on scouting along. And then we will need to expend some of this. We have tons of production, though. So this is actually not a problem. Do we have? We are, in fact, ready now for this next advance. Damnatio Memoriae, which is, I'm sure, a horrible butchering. I'm not full on that pronunciation. Person's name was part of his spiritual nature. To harm a person, one would break a vessel with his name or erase it from his funeral monument. That was done to various dissenters against the king's rule, and even an objectionable king could suffer such a fate. His name would be erased everywhere, resulting in posthumous oblivion. And this partly explains. It's not all of it. Some of them were just missing or not known or whatever. But it does explain why some of the distinctions between the different lists of kings are what they are, because they intentionally didn't want to remember some of them. And the spiritual part of this is very important. It's not just a case of a cover-up or trying to erase history, for that sort of a reason. It's more, wanting to honor the traditions, wanting to honor the gods properly and all of that by doing everything they can to reject and damage and do away with the memory of those rulers that, were not particularly favored or who sort of went off the reservation or whatever. Probably the most famous example of this, although the details of their life are spotty, is Akhenaten, who is sort of called the heretic pharaoh, and a lot of historians would argue the worst pharaoh that Egypt ever had. And he's from beyond the time period that we're talking about, roughly mid-1300s BC. But he tried to change a lot of things about Egypt. And it was centered around the fact that he wanted to make Egypt more of a monotheistic culture rather than the polytheism that had been there for 2,000 years. He focused on the worship of Aten, and in keeping with that, he changed all of the art style. He remade the capital city of Thebes and ultimately left Thebes, tried to form his own capital, focused solely on the worship of Aten. He really wasn't interested in engaging a whole lot with the other, the foreign policy, the regional partners of Egypt outside the empire. And basically, he made a big mess. And we don't know exactly the conditions of his death. And there were a couple brief pharaohs that followed him, and a lot of references to Akhenaten are gone. We do know that it wasn't very long after his reign. I believe it was 2 or 3 pharaohs later. One of his younger sons reaches his point in the succession, comes to power, and basically isn't around that long, but sets to work eliminating all references that he can find to Akhenaten and trying to restore the status quo. And that effort was ultimately successful enough that we did not even know about Akhenaten until the campaigns of Napoleon. So now that we have that in place, we're definitely going to want to start hammering away at Osiris again, because we have lots of favor that we're going to want to use as quickly, actually, as we can to boost up that bonus. Our 5th tomb, the Tomb of Den. We also have a well here. In terms of Den's reign, there's a lot of finds that have been made related to Den. The most significant distinctives that I'm aware of are, one, that they started using numbering in their hieroglyphics, so they're able to do things like name the year and then give a list of events that happened in that year, and a lot of artifacts that we have found in that vein. Another is that while it's not actually permitted at this point in the game, due to the way the mechanics are set up, the use of granite on the tombs. Den's tomb was the first one that had that in place, red granite. We will not have that until we advance much further into the more advanced pyramid structures. And then our well here, where is that at? We're set here. So I think we're definitely going to want to go after that particular luxuries boost. And I think we're going to leave off here for now. We're definitely got this fight here where we're going to conquer this area. We're still working on the Sinai area, which we're a little bit overdue, but we got some good luck in some other areas, so I can't complain about it too much. Hopefully that will come in soon, along with the remaining tombs of the First Dynasty. We still have 3 of them more to go. Thanks for watching, everybody. That'll be coming up next time on Egypt Old Kingdom.